The Dead Man was not just another black and white Western. It was a psychedelic journey into the American frontier that pushed its cast to their breaking points, exhausted its budget, and challenged audiences to question the very nature of civilization and violence. While audiences watched Johnny Depp transform from accountant to outlaw in a surreal vision of the Old West, the real drama was happening behind the camera. A star who walked off set during filming, a production that ran out of money before completion, a director who refused to compromise his vision despite studio pressure, and a legendary actor who delivered his final performance while battling terminal cancer. Today, I'm revealing 20 weird facts about Dead Man that even hardcore fans do not know. And stick around for our bonus fact, the shocking reason why several scenes were permanently cut from the film and remain unreleased to this day. Number 20. Robert De Niro turned down the lead role that made Johnny Depp a star. What audiences did not know was that Johnny Depp was not the first choice to play William Blake. The role was originally offered to Robert De Niro, who rejected it immediately. It was not scheduling conflicts or money, it was creative disagreement. De Niro read the script and was baffled by its philosophical approach to the Western genre. He did not just pass on the role, he questioned whether such an unconventional film could find an audience at all. I don't understand this character's journey. De Niro reportedly told his agent, he goes from accountant to killer to spiritual seeker without clear motivation. Audiences won't follow this. This rejection actually shaped the final film as director Jim Jarmusch cast Depp, whose younger, more ethereal quality perfectly captured the transformation from civilized man to wilderness spirit. De Niro's conventional approach to character would have created an entirely different film. Number 19. Gary Farmer was nearly fired for refusing to act in certain scenes. Gary Farmer's iconic performance as Nobody was not just acting, it was a commitment to authentic Native representation that nearly cost him his role. The First Nations actor repeatedly refused to perform scenes. He felt perpetuated harmful stereotypes about Indigenous people. The conflict erupted during filming of scenes where nobody was supposed to display magical abilities. Farmer, who had researched actual Native spiritual practices, argued that these elements reduced complex cultural beliefs to Hollywood tropes. Jim wanted me to do things that weren't just inaccurate, they were disrespectful. Farmer later recalled, I told him I wouldn't participate in turning our traditions into circus tricks. The standoff lasted 2 days with Jarmusch threatening to recast the role. Producer Demetra J. McBride eventually mediated a compromise, rewriting several scenes to align with Farmer's concerns. The tension actually strengthened the film as Jarmusch incorporated Farmer's cultural insights into the character, creating a more nuanced portrayal that became one of the film's most praised elements. Number 18. The production ran out of money and had to stop filming for 3 months. Dead Man was not just filmed on a tight budget, it ran out of money completely during production, forcing a 3-month shutdown while director Jim Jarmusch scrambled for additional funding. It was not just financial miscalculation. The film's ambitious scope, including shooting in multiple remote locations, created costs that exceeded the initial $9 million budget. After just 6 weeks of filming, the production ran out of funds entirely. We literally couldn't buy film stock. Producer Demetra J. McBride later admitted, we had to send everyone home and hope we could find more money. Jarmusch, unwilling to compromise his vision, refused to make the budget cuts that potential investors demanded. Instead, he mortgaged his own apartment and took out personal loans to complete filming. The shutdown actually benefited the film creatively. When production resumed, the cast had had time to fully inhabit their characters, creating more authentic performances that reviewers noted as unusually deep for a Western. Number 17. The film's black and white visuals were a studio battle. What audiences see as artistic choice was actually the result of a bitter battle between director Jim Jarmusch and Miramax Films. The studio initially demanded the film be shot in color, believing a black and white Western had no commercial potential. The conflict escalated when Jarmusch refused to compromise, arguing that the monochrome palette was essential to the film's dreamlike quality and philosophical themes. Miramax executives, led by Harvey Weinstein, threatened to pull funding unless Jarmusch shot in color. Harvey told me black and white was suicide at the box office, Jarmusch later recalled. I told him color would be suicide for the film's soul. The standoff reached its breaking point when Jarmusch offered to reduce his directorial fee significantly in exchange for creative control over the visual approach. Miramax reluctantly agreed. but with a reduced distribution budget that limited the film's theatrical release. The decision proved artistically but not commercially successful. The film received critical acclaim for its distinctive visuals, but performed poorly at the box office, validating the studio's initial concerns. Number 16. Lance Henriksen walked off set during filming of his death scene. Lance Henriksen's chilling performance as bounty hunter Cole Wilson was not just acting, it was a method approach that became too real for the actor. During filming of his character's death scene, Henriksen became so immersed in the moment that he walked off set in distress. The scene required Henriksen to be covered in blood and prosthetic wounds while delivering his final lines. After multiple takes, the actor reportedly felt overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment and the physical discomfort of the makeup effects. I was lying there, covered in fake blood, and suddenly it felt too real, Henriksen later explained. The violence of the character, the brutality of his death, it was too much to process in that moment. Director Jim Jarmusch stopped filming and gave Henriksen a break, but the actor returned to his trailer and refused to continue. Production was halted for 4 hours while Jarmusch and producers convinced Henriksen to return. The incident created tension on set, with some crew members feeling Henriksen was unprofessional. Others sympathized with his method approach, noting that his commitment to the character resulted in one of the film's most memorable performances. Number 15. The film's violence shocked test audiences and nearly received an NC-17 rating. Dead Man was not just philosophical, it was brutally violent in ways that disturbed early test audiences. The film's unflinching depiction of frontier violence nearly earned it an NC-17 rating from the Motion Picture Association of America. What audiences did not realize was that the version in theaters was significantly toned down from Jarmusch's original cut. Initial screenings featured much more graphic violence, including extended sequences of the consequences of gunshots that showed bodies in various states of decay. The Motion Picture Association of America Ratings Board warned the film would receive their most restrictive classification, effectively killing its commercial prospects. Only then did Jarmusch relent, removing approximately 3 minutes of graphic footage. We pushed the boundaries of what could be shown in black and white, editor Jay Rabinowitz later said. The contrast made the blood appear almost artistic, which somehow made it more disturbing. Even in its edited form, the film received a controversial R rating, unusual for an art house release in 1995. The excised footage has never been publicly shown, though rumors persist that Jarmusch preserved his original cut. Number 14. Robert Mitchum's final performance was filmed while he was battling cancer. Robert Mitchum's powerful performance as factory owner John Dickinson was not just acting, it was the legendary actor's final film role, delivered while he was battling terminal cancer. The screen icon, who had been diagnosed with lung cancer, was gravely ill during filming. What audiences did not know was that Mitchum required oxygen between takes and could only work for short periods due to his deteriorating health. Production assistants were assigned to monitor his condition, ensuring he was comfortable but not interfering with his performance. Robert knew this would be his last film. Director Jim Jarmusch later recalled, "There was a sadness in his eyes that wasn't acting, it was the awareness of his own mortality." The most poignant aspect was that Mitchum's character delivers several philosophical monologues about death and mortality that took on new meaning, given the actor's condition. Some cast members found it difficult to separate the character from the man playing him. Mitchum died just 2 months after the film's release, making Dead Man a fittingly unconventional conclusion to a career that had spanned 5 decades and included some of Hollywood's most iconic performances. Number 13. The film's soundtrack was recorded before shooting began. Neil Young's haunting soundtrack was not just composed for the film, it was recorded before principal photography began, an unconventional approach that influenced the entire production process. What audiences did not know was that director Jim Jarmusch sent Young a rough cut of the film and asked him to improvise a soundtrack while watching it in a single take. Young, working alone in a recording studio, created the entire score in one session without watching the film more than once. "I wanted Neil's immediate emotional response to the images," Jarmusch later explained. "Not a carefully composed score, but raw, spontaneous music. The resulting soundtrack, performed primarily on electric guitar with minimal overdubs, became so integral to the film that Jarmusch actually played it on set during filming to help actors get into the right mood. This reverse approach to filmmaking, creating the soundtrack before completing the picture, was highly unusual and contributed to the film's dreamlike quality. Young's improvised guitar melodies became as much a character in the film as any of the actors. Number 12. Johnny Depp lived in a tent for 2 weeks to prepare for his role. Johnny Depp's transformation from mild-mannered accountant to wilderness wanderer was not just acting, it was the result of an extreme preparation method that involved living alone in the wilderness for 2 weeks before filming began. What audiences did not know was that Depp, determined to authentically portray his character's journey, requested to spend time alone in the Oregon wilderness where the film was shot. He lived in a basic tent with minimal supplies, experiencing the isolation and environmental challenges his character would face. "I needed to understand what it feels like to be stripped of civilization," Depp later explained, "to be alone with your thoughts in the wilderness." Director Jim Jarmusch was initially skeptical of this method approach, but was impressed by the authenticity it brought to Depp's performance. The actor's willingness to physically and mentally inhabit his character's journey became a model for other cast members. Number 11. The film's historical inaccuracies were deliberate. Dead Man was not just historically inaccurate, it deliberately subverted historical facts to create a philosophical allegory about American expansion and violence. What audiences did not realize was that director Jim Jarmusch consciously rejected historical accuracy in favor of thematic truth. The film's depiction of the American West mixes elements from different time periods, creating a timeless landscape that resembles myth more than history. "I wasn't making a documentary about the 19th century," Jarmusch later explained. "I was creating a meditation on violence, civilization, and spiritual transformation that could happen at any time." The most deliberate inaccuracy was the portrayal of Native American culture, which combines elements from different tribes and time periods to create a universal representation of indigenous wisdom confronting colonial violence. This approach initially confused some critics who expected a more conventional Western. However, it ultimately contributed to the film's cult status, as viewers recognized that the historical setting was merely a backdrop for exploring universal themes of mortality and transformation. Number 10. The film changed how indie films were financed and distributed. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we are about to reveal how Dead Man literally changed independent cinema. This is not just film trivia, it is the reason why many indie films today are made and distributed the way they are. When Dead Man was released, its unconventional financing and distribution model created a new template for independent filmmaking that challenged the Hollywood system. The film's production company, New Line Cinema, took an unprecedented risk by greenlighting a black and white philosophical Western with no commercial prospects. The film's limited release strategy, opening in only a few theaters before gradually expanding based on critical response, became a model for distributing challenging independent films. This approach allowed films that might otherwise have been overlooked to find their audience through word of mouth and critical acclaim. Dead Man proved that there was an audience for unconventional cinema if you knew how to reach them. Producer Demetra J. McBride later wrote, "It wasn't about massive openings, it was about building momentum gradually." The film's success, despite its challenging content and black and white photography, convinced studios that there was commercial potential in more artistic, risk-taking projects. This opened doors for a generation of filmmakers who might otherwise have been shut out of the system. Your like and subscribe helps us uncover more stories about films that did not just entertain, they changed entertainment itself. Number 9, the film's ending was deliberately ambiguous to confuse audiences. Dead Man's enigmatic conclusion was not just artistic choice, it was deliberately designed to defy audience expectations and resist easy interpretation. Director Jim Jarmusch wanted to create an ending that would leave viewers questioning what they had just seen. What audiences did not know was that Jarmusch filmed multiple versions of the final scene, each suggesting different interpretations of William Blake's fate. He ultimately chose the most ambiguous version, showing Blake floating in a canoe while nobody prepares to send him to the spirit world. I didn't want to give audiences the comfort of knowing exactly what happened. Jarmusch later explained, "The ambiguity is the point we all face death with uncertainty. The ending initially frustrated some viewers who expected a more conventional resolution to Blake's journey. However, it has since become one of the most discussed aspects of the film, with critics and scholars offering numerous interpretations ranging from literal death to spiritual transformation. The ambiguity extends to the film's very title, which Jarmusch has refused to definitively explain, leaving viewers to wonder whether it refers to Blake's physical death, his spiritual death, or the death of his former identity." Number 8. The film was shot in chronological order to capture the character's transformation. Dead Man was not just filmed in sequence, it was shot in strict chronological order, an unusual and expensive approach that allowed the actors to experience their characters' journeys in real time. What audiences did not know was that director Jim Jarmusch insisted on this method to authentically capture William Blake's gradual transformation from civilized accountant to wilderness wanderer. This meant the production had to move between locations in the exact order the story unfolds rather than grouping scenes by location for efficiency. "We wanted Johnny to experience the character's journey as it happened," Jarmusch later explained. "Each scene builds on the physical and emotional experiences of the previous ones." This approach was particularly challenging for Johnny Depp, who had to progressively alter his physical appearance and mental state as Blake becomes more disconnected from civilization. By the end of filming, Depp had adopted many of his character's mannerisms so completely that crew members noted he had become difficult to recognize as the same person who started filming. The chronological shooting schedule was expensive and inefficient, but Jarmusch and the cast agreed it was essential to creating the authentic transformation that makes the film so compelling. Number 7. The film's cinematographer used special lenses from the 1920s. Dead Man's distinctive visual style was not just achieved through black and white photography. Cinematographer Robbie Mueller used specially adapted lenses from the 1920s to create the film's dreamlike quality. What audiences did not know was that Mueller, dissatisfied with modern camera equipment, searched for vintage lenses that could capture the soft, ethereal quality he envisioned. He eventually found a set of Zeiss lenses from the 1920s that had been used in silent films and adapted them for modern cameras. "These lenses see the world differently," Mueller later explained. "They don't have the sharp perfection of modern optics. They have character and imperfections that create a more poetic image." The most innovative aspect was how Mueller used these lenses to capture the natural light of the Oregon wilderness, creating images that seem almost painted rather than photographed. This approach required extremely long exposure times and careful planning, as the vintage lenses could not be adjusted as quickly as modern equipment. The result was a visual style that resembled old photographs more than contemporary films, creating a sense of timelessness that perfectly matched the film's philosophical themes. Number 6, the film's distribution was so limited. Many critics couldn't see it. Dead Man was not just an art house film, it was so narrowly distributed that many prominent critics could not see it before writing their reviews. The film's limited release strategy meant it opened in only a handful of theaters nationwide. What audiences did not know was that this limited distribution was not entirely by choice. After poor test screenings, Miramax Films reduced the theatrical release to just 23 theaters nationwide, making it difficult for many critics to view the film before their deadlines. Several major publications, including the New York Times, initially assigned reviews to critics who had not actually seen the film, basing their assessments on screeners and industry buzz rather than theatrical viewing. "We were reviewing a film that most people couldn't actually see," critic Roger Ebert later wrote. "It created a strange dynamic where reviews became more about the film's existence than its content. The limited distribution initially harmed the film's commercial prospects but eventually contributed to its cult status, as audiences who managed to find it felt they had discovered something special that mainstream viewers had missed." Number 5. The film's title was inspired by a 19th century poem. Dead Man's enigmatic title was not just a reference to the protagonist's fate, it was inspired by a 19th century poem by William Blake that reflects the film's themes of mortality and spiritual transformation. What audiences did not know was that director Jim Jarmusch named both the protagonist and the film after the English poet, whose works explore similar themes of innocence, experience, and spiritual journey. The film contains numerous references to Blake's poetry. though most are subtle enough to be missed by casual viewers. William Blake's poetry is about seeing the physical world as a manifestation of the spiritual. Jarmusch later explained, "That's exactly what I wanted the film to explore. The most direct reference is the protagonist's journey from accountant to killer to spiritual seeker, which mirrors Blake's concept of the marriage of heaven and hell, the integration of opposites to achieve spiritual wholeness." This literary connection adds depth to repeated viewings as audiences begin to recognize how the film's events and images correspond to themes in Blake's poetry, creating a richer interpretation of the story's philosophical underpinnings. Number 4, the film was rejected by the Cannes Film Festival. Dead Man was not just an art house film, it was initially rejected by the Cannes Film Festival, one of the most prestigious venues for international cinema. The rejection came as a surprise to director Jim Jarmusch, who had previously shown films at the festival. What audiences did not know was that the selection committee found the film too experimental and challenging for mainstream audiences, even by Cannes standards. The committee's feedback reportedly described the film as self-indulgent and too inaccessible for festival programming. They wanted something more conventional, more easily digestible, Jarmusch later recalled. Dead Man refuses to be easily categorized or understood. The rejection was particularly disappointing as Jarmusch had hoped to premiere the film at a major European festival where his previous work had been well received. However, the film eventually found more appreciative audiences at smaller, more specialized festivals. The rejection ironically contributed to the film's mystique, as it became known as a film too challenging even for the avant-garde cinema establishment. This reputation attracted curious viewers who wanted to see what had been deemed too experimental for Cannes. Number 3, the film's production designer built the town from scratch without blueprints. Dead Man's distinctive town of Machine was not just filmed on a location, it was built from scratch without formal blueprints, creating an intentionally disorienting and dreamlike environment that defied conventional Western town design. What audiences did not know was that production designer Bob Ziembicki rejected traditional Western town layouts in favor of a more abstract, expressionistic approach. He built a town with impossible perspectives and architectural inconsistencies that subtly unsettle viewers. "I wanted Machine to feel like a place that exists in a nightmare," Ziembicki later explained. "The buildings don't make logical sense because the town represents the chaos of civilization, not its order." The most innovative aspect was how Ziembicki designed the town to reflect William Blake's psychological state. As Blake becomes more disconnected from civilization, the town's architecture becomes increasingly distorted and nightmarish. This approach required custom-built sets rather than using existing Western town locations, adding significantly to the film's budget. However, Jarmusch and Ziembicki agreed that the distinctive visual environment was essential to creating the film's unique atmosphere. Number 2, the film's box office failure nearly ended Jarmusch's career. Dead Man was not just a commercial disappointment, it was such a box office failure that it nearly ended director Jim Jarmusch's career in mainstream filmmaking. The film earned only $1.2 million against its $9 million budget, making it one of the biggest financial failures of 1995. What audiences did not know was that the poor performance created a crisis of confidence among studio executives, who became reluctant to fund Jarmusch's future projects. The director struggled to secure financing for his next film, Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai, which took 4 years to produce. After Dead Man, nobody wanted to give me money, Jarmusch later recalled. "I was considered too experimental, too difficult for audiences. The commercial failure was particularly disappointing given the film's critical acclaim and strong reviews. Many critics praised Dead Man as one of the year's best films, but their enthusiasm did not translate to ticket sales. The experience forced Jarmusch to adopt a more modest approach to filmmaking, working with smaller budgets and more limited distribution. However, it also solidified his reputation as a filmmaker unwilling to compromise his artistic vision for commercial considerations." Number 1, the film's opening credits were a last-minute addition after poor test screenings. What audiences do not realize is that Dead Man's distinctive opening credits featuring Johnny Depp's character traveling by train while Neil Young's music plays was not in the original cut. The sequence was added after disastrous test screenings where viewers found the film's beginning too abrupt and confusing. Director Jim Jarmusch had initially wanted to throw audiences directly into the action without traditional opening credits, believing this would create a more immersive experience. However, test audiences reported feeling disoriented and unsure of what was happening in the early scenes. People didn't know who William Blake was or why he was on that train. Jarmusch later explained, "We needed to establish his character and the film's tone before the story began." The solution was to add a 6-minute opening sequence showing Blake's journey west, accompanied by Young's haunting guitar score. This addition helped establish the film's mood and provided context for Blake's transformation from accountant to wanderer. The opening credits have since become one of the film's most praised elements, perfectly setting the tone for the philosophical journey that follows. However, they represent a rare instance where Jarmusch compromised his artistic vision in response to audience feedback. Bonus fact: the most closely guarded secret of Dead Man is not on any screen. It is contained in a sealed box at the Museum of Modern Art's Film Archive. After completing the film, Jim Jarmusch created a collection of deleted scenes, alternative endings, and behind-the-scenes footage with instructions that it remained sealed until at least 25 years after the film's release. What makes this particularly intriguing is that the box reportedly contains approximately 45 minutes of footage that Jarmusch considered too experimental or challenging even for this unconventional film. The material includes scenes that further develop the spiritual themes, extended conversations between Blake and Nobody, and an alternative ending that suggests Blake's journey continues beyond death. According to Museum of Modern Art Film curator Rajendra Roy, the collection also contains making of documentaries that reveal Jarmusch's creative process in unprecedented detail, including his conversations with Neil Young about creating the soundtrack. The box was opened in 2020, but its contents have not been made publicly available. Rumors suggest that Jarmusch is planning a special edition release of Dead Man that will include this previously unseen material, offering fans new insights into one of the most enigmatic films of the 1990s. Dead Man was not just a film that challenged the Western genre, it pushed the boundaries of independent cinema, creating a visual and philosophical experience that continues to influence filmmakers today. Its legacy extends beyond entertainment into artistic expression, challenging viewers to question civilization, violence, and spiritual transformation. What began as an unconventional take on the American frontier transformed into a cult classic that still defies easy categorization. The next time you watch this masterpiece, you will see beyond the surface narrative to the deeper story behind one of cinema's most distinctive and challenging films. If you enjoyed these revelations about Dead Man, hit that subscribe button for more untold stories from cinema history. And share in the comments, which of these facts about Jim Jarmusch's philosophical Western surprised you the most?